Hi, I'm Andrew Smith with Virginia Farm Bureau's Governmental Relations Department.
And I'm Stephanie Talon with the Government Relations Department. Andrew and I are so excited to debut a new video series today called Friend of the Farm Chats, where we sit down with legislators who serve on the House and Senate Agriculture Committees and just get to know them a little bit better.
Thank you, Stephanie. And today we're very happy to have Delegate Ken Plum from the 36th District, number one in the House of Delegates. We're very happy to have you with us today, Delegate Plum. Could you tell us about yourself and why you first ran for office?
That's an old story because, when you say I'm number one, that means I've had greater seniority than anybody else. Of course, we'd love to think it's number one in the hearts and minds of people, but I grew up in rural Virginia. I grew up in Page County. And although my mom and dad were not involved in politics at all, for some reason in school, it was a subject of great interest to me and something that I really had aspired to be involved with. Now, we came from fairly humble beginnings. My dad, I'll call him a farmer, although we only owned 4 acres, but he had the best farm in town in terms of vegetables and so on. We raised everything that we ate during the wintertime. We had a garner in the cellar where we put our potatoes for the year. And for a long time, Mom canned extra things that we raised and so on. But we then got a deep freeze, and that was really a great advance for us to have a deep freeze. So they would get up and pick the peas before the sun got up, shell those things, dip them in some freezing water, and stick them in the freezer. So by the time the peas woke up, they were frozen. And then when you cooked them, months later, you had fresh peas. So how did I get involved in politics? It has nothing to do with all that. It's just simply to say that, my background was not one of being involved in public service, nor were my mom and dad. But I got involved and I went off to what was then the Norfolk College of William and Mary, later to become Old Dominion University, studied history and political science, worked in political campaigns. Eventually, because of work opportunities, I moved to Northern Virginia. I did a master's degree in the meantime at the University of Virginia in, again, teaching history and political science. And I taught history and government in the public schools of Fairfax for a period of time. And after working in a number of campaigns and getting to know a number of candidates, I thought, gee whiz, if those people can serve in public office and do it, then I can too. And so
And a lot of the work you do revolves around the House Agriculture Committee. You've served on that committee for many years and were fairly recently appointed the chair. Can you tell us, you've touched on this a little bit with your background, but prior to joining the committee, did you have any ties to agriculture or forestry?
Yeah, I've been on the committee since 1982. And during that period of time, it's gone through various names. Its current name is Agriculture, Chesapeake, and Natural Resources. Growing up in the Valley, and of course, Page County is part of the Page Valley, part of the Greater Shadow Valley, which is a real agricultural area. One of my experiences of childhood was the excitement every year of going to the Rockingham County Fair. Page is right next to Rockingham, and while Page didn't have a lot of flat land and so on, a lot of areas to farm, it became a poultry area. And my dad actually rented a chicken house for a while, and we raised some poultry to make some extra money. He worked on the Norfolk Western Railroad, but to make a little extra money. And I can remember the first time we sold our crop of chickens, 5,500 chickens. Then you raise them about 12 to 14 weeks, and I think now broilers are finished off quicker than that. But we made $100. And the $100 bought our first television, which happened to be a black and white television. But nonetheless, that was a big experience of agriculture. But going off the Rockingham County Fair, you really saw what agriculture was about. It's a super big fair, and I think it probably still is. I haven't been in recent years. But as a little kid climbing up on the tractors and climbing on the combines and so on was a great excitement for me. But also going through the county fair exhibits. I was in 4-H Club, and my project in 4-H Club was to raise chickens, and they would send you 25 little peepees, and you'd raise them out as part of your effort. So I'm a country boy at heart, And sometimes people, when they think about us, those of us who live in the suburbs of DC, maybe have a different attitude about what we might know or what our background might be. But I'm essentially a country boy at heart, proud of it. And I moved to Northern Virginia because I could make a living. At that time, as a teacher, it was a good opportunity for me to get into education, where I became a teacher, I became an administrator eventually to make money. But I've always maintained an interest in agriculture. Number one, I'm a fruits and vegetable guy, and I have always appreciated the farmers' contributions to our business and industry in our state, as being as big as it is. And also, too, a concern that I have from having grown up in the country and loving Virginia, the preservation of our natural resources. Again, sometimes there's a suggestion that maybe there's a conflict between, say, a farming industry and an interest in natural resources, and I don't see the conflict at all. I see them very complementary. And so the degree to which we can work to make those complementary, I want to do that.
Great. Delegate Plum, often when I'm in committees at the General Assembly, I hear legislators talking about the bills before them and how they've learned something about the industries that they may not have known of. What do you feel like you've learned by serving on the House Ag Committee?
Well, the appreciation of the size of agriculture as part of our economy of Virginia is something that you have to come to appreciate. The fact that agriculture and forestry and so on are really our biggest industries in the state and major contributors to our economy. You have to recognize that. Secondly, we've had retreats and field trips and so on as a committee where we've actually gone out to farms and so on, and talking actually to the farmers in the field. And last year, you guys organized some farmers to actually come see us. That is so meaningful as an experience because it's hard to walk in someone else's shoes. And being able to talk to people directly is very valuable to understand. First of all, the business of agriculture itself is so complex. It's not like something that you go to every day and you get a check at the end of the month. It's something that requires year-round planning, use of resources, having to deal with natural changes in the weather and all that sort of thing. You come to get a greater appreciation of what the farming industry is like.
Delegate Plum, you mentioned your district is fairly urban. Can you tell us a little bit more about it and how agriculture and forestry fit into it?
Certainly I can. Reston is a planned community in Northern Virginia. For folks who are familiar with Fairfax County, it's out kind of near Dulles Airport. It has an interesting history in that it grew out of the largest farm in Virginia at the time. In the 1960s, a fellow named Robert E. Simon, that's R-E-S-T-O-N, Reston, his initials form the name, wanted to build a community that was unique, that took into account the natural advantages of the area, as well as the housing stock and so on. And he bought Smith Bowman Farm. Now, people who are familiar with the name Smith Bowman know that they had a distillery, and while they raised a lot of corn, they converted that corn to liquid stuff and sold it as Virginia Gentleman Bourbon, and they sold vodka and so on. And they have, of course, in more recent times, moved down to Central Virginia for their operation. But this community then took into account the natural advantages of the region and preserved, for example, its trees. My wife and I, who go out walking early in the mornings, just within a couple of minutes of leaving our home, are in a forested area that's been preserved, and we walk for our 45 minutes or so in the forest. Don't see any trees, don't hear any cars. It's a wonderful experience. There's some deers running around. They're always a lot of fun. They've actually become relatively tame. My wife and I are oftentimes the only people on the trail that time of mornings, and they don't seem to pay much attention to us anymore, knowing that we're fairly harmless. But the stream that passed through that area was really eroded over time, and there's been a whole effort to restore the streams to their natural state so that what we walk through now looks like just natural streams from the beginning. Also, as part of my region, I will tell you that every Saturday morning we have the most wonderful farmers market around. Farmers compete to come to our market because it is such a busy place. We have about 25 vendors or so, starting in early spring, going through the early fall. And it's a place to go both in terms of getting fresh food to eat, but also in terms of being able to meet with friends and neighbors. Now, of course, it's with the pandemic, we don't have that much time to talk, but we can now go online through a Virginia Farmers down in Northern Neck and Middle Virginia, place our order via online, and Saturday morning pick up at the farmers market. And it's just been picked the day before. So you can't beat that in terms of freshness. So we are very much a forested community. We probably have a higher rate of trees per person than any region around. And we are also very tied into a recognition of how the farmers support our community.
Mr. Chairman, you've talked about agriculture and your time on the committee with this, but when you think of agriculture and forestry, what do you think of?
Well, it's a broader field than maybe some folks think of it as being, in terms of the fact that there is certainly the farmer at the beginning, but there's a whole agribusiness around agriculture that we have to be concerned about. So while we love the farmer tilling in the soil, the fact of the matter is that there are a whole lot of people who both support that farmer in terms of business practices and so on, but the farmer also has an effect on a whole lot of other people. So it's a much broader topic than simply planting tree seedlings. Incidentally, out back in my house now, it sounds like a war zone because the acorns are falling, and we're gathering up the acorns and we'll pass them along to the Department of Forestry, and of course they'll become seedlings and they'll relate to the restoration of the community. But the point I would have to make would be the fact, again, that there are a number of people whose lives depend on the enterprise of farming and forestry beyond just the tilling of the soil and the planting of the seedling.
Well, I have one last question for you, Delegate Plum, and it's an easy one. What is your favorite Virginia-grown product?
Well, that's not an easy one because I love a lot of Virginia products, and I will tell you that as I'll use this as a political occasion to give a compliment to one of my constituents here in Reston. She just was awarded a major grant from the government's office that assists small business people. She makes a kind of flavored peanut butter. She uses several thousand pounds, and I'm hesitant to use the number because it's a huge number, of Virginia peanuts every week, that turns it into, one of my favorites is chocolate peanut butter, made in Virginia, and for which we have now gone from her kitchen industry, which is how this started, to now an industry that's going to employ more people and use more Virginia peanuts. So Mon Ami peanut butter, if you haven't tried it, try it. It's at some of the leading grocers now, in particularly Northern Virginia, or you can buy it online. It's MON, capital AMI, Mon Ami peanut butter. It's a favorite because it comes from one of my constituents, and also because it is really quite good.
I'll definitely have to try that peanut butter, because chocolate and peanut butter are definitely two of my favorite things, especially when you combine them. And we saw that announcement about the APHID grant and are so glad to see that people are taking advantage of that program, because it certainly has done a lot for the industry and localities. So glad to hear that someone in your district is taking advantage of that.
Good.
And we are so glad and appreciative that you were able to join us today. We learned a lot about you and your background. I think we're glad to hear that you're a country boy at heart, and I think some of our viewers will be pleasantly surprised to hear about how you grew up in a rural area and have all those ties to agriculture. And we appreciate all that you do and have done for the agriculture and forestry industries.
And I want to say, too, how appreciative I am of the support that you give us in the legislature. There's no way that we come with any background knowledge of all the issues we have to deal with. So the degree to which people can involve themselves, and gosh knows, those of you in the government service office, I love you most of all, of course, but I have to say to you, too, when you bring in some of your constituents, as I talked about, and have us have an opportunity to meet with some farmers, or when they have an opportunity to come to Richmond and talk to us, that's the way good government comes about. So I appreciate what you all do in terms of informing us as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.